betrayal, power, and a web of secrets. When Elon Musk confronts Tucker Carlson with shocking revelations about Joe Biden, the truth changes everything. He never really stepped away from influence. Biden left the vice presidency, but did he truly leave the corridors of power? The cameras always followed him, the donors still lined up with their checks, and the backroom conversations never stopped. Tucker Carlson sits in his usual spot, desk neatly organized, eyes locked on the camera. His tie is crisp, but there's a certain tension in his posture, an energy that suggests he's about to disclose something big. "Tonight," he begins, voice steady but charged, "we're going to unravel the hidden world behind our current president. Because there's a story nobody's telling, one that might just change how you view American politics forever." He lets the silence build, a calculated pause that bristles with expectation. Joe Biden has been in politics for decades. He's worn the label of senator, vice president, and now president. But have you ever wondered how a man who spent so much of his life in public service, accumulated massive wealth, global connections, and an influence that extends far beyond the Oval Office? Tonight we dive into that question, and Elon Musk is here to break it wide open. The camera shifts to Elon Musk, seated across from Carlson. His posture is composed, yet there's a flicker in his eyes, a readiness to blow the lid off something colossal. He leans in, elbows resting on the table. "Tucker," he says, voice calm but urgent, "let's talk about money, influence, and exactly how a career politician ended up with the kind of power that usually belongs to tech titans or media moguls. Because that's what Biden has, a global network that stretches into the realms of energy, manufacturing, foreign governments, and nobody seems to be asking how or why." Carlson narrows his eyes. "You're saying this isn't just about a few questionable deals or memoir royalties. You're saying Biden's empire goes deeper?" Musk nods. "A lot deeper. The speeches, the book deals, those are distractions. The real power move is happening in places most Americans don't even see. Quiet partnerships, silent investors, a labyrinth of shell companies. The architecture is designed to hide the flow of money and the source of influence." Carlson exhales slowly, weighing Musk's words. "We know about the multiple homes, the business dealings of his family members, but you're suggesting there's a system behind all of this, one that's still funneling resources and access straight into his hands?" Musk's gaze intensifies. "Absolutely. Biden's not just a politician who got lucky. He's been a key player for decades, aligning himself with powerful industries, forging relationships with lobbyists, banks, and foreign players. And once you understand how those connections work, you see the pattern, a constant exchange of favors that outlasts any election cycle." Carlson leans back, letting the viewers absorb the gravity of the claim. Viewers at home might think they've heard all about Biden's controversies, but what you're talking about sounds bigger, more orchestrated. Where does it begin? Musk adjusts his jacket, glancing momentarily down at a folder on the table. "It begins with influence, with forging ties to industries that matter, tech, energy, finance. Then once you're in, you expand, foreign partnerships, global nonprofits, foundations that claim to do good but end up as pipelines for money and political leverage. And Biden, while playing the folksy politician from Scranton, built a network that rivals some of the biggest corporate empires." Carlson taps a pen against the desk, a nervous habit creeping through. "And you have evidence of this?" Musk nods. "I've been studying patterns, public records, property purchases, inexplicable deals signed shortly after major policy changes. It's all out there, but it's hidden in plain sight. People don't connect the dots because they're too busy focusing on headlines that tell a smaller story. But if you zoom out, you see how the puzzle fits together." Carlson's expression tightens, a flare of determination in his eyes. "It's not just about hidden bank accounts, is it? It's about how policy decisions might have been influenced by private gains. Are we talking about that level of entanglement?" Musk exhales. "We are. Think about it. The average politician might dabble in questionable deals, but the scale we're talking about here is massive. We're talking billions of dollars across multiple nations, across industries that shape global markets. And Biden has remained a key figure, someone who, even when he wasn't sitting in the White House, was never truly out of the game." Carlson steeples his fingers. "And the public? They've been told a different story, that Biden's just a man of the people, an elder statesman who overcame personal tragedy, someone who's devoted his life to service." Musk shrugs, his lips forming a thin line. "That's the narrative. It's effective. It keeps scrutiny low because who wants to question a politician who's presented as a humble, relatable figure? But behind that narrative is a machine. It's the same machine that's made other politicians wealthy beyond comprehension after they've left office. But in Biden's case, it's still happening right under our noses. Carlson leans in again, his next question hitting like a hammer. Elon, let's not mince words. You're suggesting that Biden is using his position, or used it in the past, to cultivate an empire that now operates quietly, often invisible to the public. And that empire might still be guiding policy decisions for personal gain. Musk's eyes don't waver. That's exactly what I'm suggesting. He's far from the only one, but he might be the most successful at maintaining a benevolent public image while pulling the strings behind closed doors. People talk about corruption, but they don't realize how sophisticated it's become. This isn't just about stuffing cash in envelopes. It's about shaping economies, industries, and even geopolitical alliances. Carlson exhales through pursed lips. He turns to the camera. America, if you're listening, you might wonder, isn't this how all politicians operate? Maybe at a smaller scale. But when you see the scale here, it's staggering. And the fact we're not talking about it, well, that's by design. He returns his gaze to Musk. Let's get specific. How do we know these connections exist? What clues should the American people look for? Musk sifts through the folder, though the camera doesn't show its contents. Property records, shell corporations, the sudden influx of funds into family-linked businesses, non-profit organizations receiving enormous donations from companies seeking government contracts, travel logs that show Biden or his closest allies meeting with foreign investors right before major policy shifts. This isn't conspiracy. These are public documents that nobody pieces together because they appear unrelated at first glance. Carlson's eyes narrow. And what about the mainstream media? Why isn't this front-page news? Musk offers a grim smile. Because major media outlets are owned by conglomerates who benefit from these same deals. Advertising dollars flow from big industries tied to Biden's network. It's not a big leap to see why certain stories never get airtime. Carlson runs a hand through his hair, frustration evident. So the stories remain buried, overshadowed by daily political bickering, trivial scandals, and partisan brawls. And the real story, the one about how a lifetime politician consolidated global influence, remains untold. Musk nods. Exactly. Because exposing it would require unraveling a system that props up countless political and corporate interests. It's not just about taking down Biden. It's about threatening an entire establishment that thrives on secrecy and complicity. Carlson's jaw clenches. I see. So let's look at one example. People talk about his deals overseas, especially in certain energy sectors. Are you saying those deals were mere pieces of a larger puzzle? Musk leans forward. Yes. Let's say a foreign corporation invests in a business tied to Biden's family. Suddenly that corporation wins a lucrative contract or sees favorable policy changes from the U.S. government. It looks unrelated on the surface. Meanwhile, new philanthropic initiatives pop up in that foreign country, branded with the Biden name. The cycle repeats in a different region. All the while, people chalk it up to chance or global diplomacy, but it's not random. Carlson's lips press into a thin line. That's quite the operation. And you're telling me it's still happening? Musk nods, hands clasped on the table. It never stopped. Biden's presidency has only expanded the scope. Look at where he travels, which industries thrive after those visits, and which philanthropic organizations suddenly receive funding. Patterns emerge if you know how to look. Carlson lifts a brow. And how does this compare to other figures who cashed in after leaving office? Musk shrugs. It's the same game, but Biden's been playing it longer than most. Decades in the Senate, 8 years as VP, relationships forged over a lifetime. The difference now is that he's the president, which accelerates everything. And let's not forget, while some controversies have surfaced around his family, those are just the tip of the iceberg. The real story is about global influence, not just laptop leaks or rumored payoffs. Carlson leans closer to Musk, voice dropping to almost a whisper. So what you're saying is that the public's focus on smaller scandals might be intentional, to distract from the real machine that's churning behind the scenes. Musk's eyes flick to the camera. Precisely. Because while everyone argues over partisan soundbites or personal gaffes, the big deals happen quietly, in hush-hush meetings, with documents that never see the light of day. And if by chance someone tries to blow the whistle, they're drowned out in the noise of day-to-day politics. Carlson straightens his tie, a flicker of anger in his expression. That's the heartbreak, Elon. The American public believes they're electing leaders who serve them. Instead, They might be pawns in a much bigger chess game. Musk's face is grim. They are pawns. The entire system is rigged to keep regular people in the dark. Meanwhile, a handful of elites, politicians turned global power brokers, amass fortunes and power. Biden's story is just one part of that, but it's a crucial part because it shows how deeply rooted this goes. Carlson turns to the audience. If you're listening, this isn't about left or right. It's about a structure that keeps insiders rich and the public misinformed. Tonight, we're focusing on Biden, but the pattern is widespread. The question is, will it ever be exposed? He glances back at Musk. Musk's expression says it all, guarded, almost resigned. Only if people demand transparency. If we connect the dots, challenge the silence, force accountability. But that's dangerous, Tucker. People who push too hard find themselves targeted, ridiculed, or worse. And this network, well, it has no shortage of resources to protect itself. Carlson clenches his teeth. But we can't stay silent. Let's peel back another layer. What about foreign governments that stand to benefit from a close relationship with the president? Are we talking about nations that can shape American policy to suit their agenda? Musk nods, an undercurrent of frustration in his voice. Definitely. Countries looking for favorable trade deals, looser regulations, or military agreements. They invest in Biden's network, sometimes indirectly, sometimes blatantly. The result? Policy that mysteriously aligns with those governments' interests. Meanwhile, the American public is told it's all for diplomatic stability or economic growth. Carlson rubs his chin. And so the cycle repeats. Money pours in, influence is exchanged, and American interests take a back seat to the personal empires of politicians. Musk's silence speaks volumes. Carlson leans forward, arms folded. Let me ask you this. Do you think Biden planned this from the beginning? Or did he just get swept up in a system that rewards those who play along? Musk tilts his head, considering. It's hard to say. Some politicians get corrupted by the system over time. Others see the opportunities and jump in willingly. After decades in Washington, Biden knew how the game was played. He might have started with simpler ambitions, but once you see how you can leverage power for gain, it's a slippery slope. And now we're here, with a global empire that extends beyond America's borders. Carlson adjusts his posture. And we're the ones left paying for it, either through higher taxes, manipulated foreign policy, or compromised national interests. Meanwhile, the mainstream narrative is that everything's fine. Musk lets out a humorless laugh. That's the biggest irony. People wonder why real change never happens, why politicians make promises but rarely deliver, because they're not incentivized to fix the system. They're incentivized to maintain it. Biden's mastery of this system is exactly why we're having this conversation. Carlson's eyes flick to the clock, the segment nearing its crescendo. He looks directly at Musk. All right, you've laid out a damning case. The question remains, what do we do? How do people fight back against something so vast, so deeply rooted? Musk's gaze sweeps across the studio before settling on Carlson. First, we expose it. That means analyzing documents, following the money, refusing to be distracted by petty scandals. Then we demand accountability. We make noise. We vote with awareness. We use every platform to ask the questions that matter. And if enough people question, if enough people see behind the curtain, the system might finally face real scrutiny. Carlson exhales, a hint of determination lighting up his face. That's a tall order. People are tired, disillusioned. They don't trust the media, and they barely trust politicians. Musk nods. That's why direct information is crucial. Independent journalism, leaks that bypass corporate media. We can't rely on the institutions that might be complicit. It's a fight for honest reporting and transparency. And it won't be easy, because you're battling not just Biden's machinery, but the entire political complex that's grown comfortable in this corruption. Carlson leans back, crossing his arms. Well, that's why we're having this conversation, Elon. Maybe, just maybe, enough people will start asking why a lifetime politician has assets and connections that rival the world's top CEOs. Maybe they'll notice that these relationships didn't materialize overnight. They're decades in the making. Musk's expression is solemn. They are. And the scariest part is, if this remains unchecked, we'll see more of the same. Leaders who claim to represent the people but actually work for a global network that operates above the law, above borders, and above any single nation's interests. Carlson's voice drops. And that, my friends, might be the biggest scandal of all. Not the minor controversies that occupy headlines, but the quiet takeover of our democracy by a handful of political elites who found a legal way to monetize power. He sets his notes aside, leaning in with a somber glare. Stay with us, because when we come back, we're going to discuss the next level, the foreign deals that might have direct consequences for American jobs, American security, and the future of how this nation operates. You don't want to miss it. Break. A moment of heavy silence in the studio. Carlson and Musk remain in place, exchanging a look that says everything. They know the weight of what they're discussing. When the cameras roll again, Carlson shifts in his chair, picks up right where they left off. So Elon, let's delve deeper into the foreign aspect. Some reports suggest that certain countries might have special deals or arrangements with Biden's network. Care to elaborate? Musk inhales, thinking carefully before speaking. Let's consider China, a massive market, a global powerhouse. American politicians who maintain cordial ties often find themselves rewarded through business deals, through investments in their families' ventures, through expansive philanthropic donations. But these relationships can compromise national interests. Think about it. If you're profiting from Chinese companies, are you really going to take a hard stance when they violate trade rules or human rights? Carlson grimaces. It's a conflict of interest that's nearly impossible to ignore. But it goes further than China, right? Musk nods. Absolutely. Consider the Middle East, Eastern Europe, or even certain Latin American countries. The pattern holds. You have leaders or influential figures in those regions looking for favorable U.S. policy. They find ways to invest in Biden's orbit. A new foundation pops up, a new consultancy forms, or a close ally starts a new company. Funds flow in, access is granted. Then, suddenly, a policy that benefits those countries appears on the American legislative agenda. Carlson's voice tightens with anger. And the American public? They're told it's for strategic alliances, for peace or economic cooperation. Musk's shoulders tense. Exactly. Meanwhile, the folks behind the scenes make fortunes. It's the same old story, repeated across continents. Carlson rubs his temples. You've been in business at the highest levels. Have you personally witnessed anything like this? People trying to buy your influence? Musk's eyebrows raise. It happens all the time. Offers of partnerships that don't make logical sense. Invitations to lavish events with powerful figures. They'll promise you resources if you play ball. Now imagine if you're a politician who controls regulations, who can shape entire industries with a single piece of legislation. The potential for corruption is boundless. Carlson's eyes narrow. So how is Biden particularly adept at this game? Musk glances at the camera, then back at Carlson. He's been around so long that he knows every trick in the book. He knows how to keep public focus on his persona while the real deals happen in private. He also surrounds himself with individuals who understand the system, lawyers, advisors, ex-lobbyists. It's a machine designed to operate smoothly without leaving obvious traces. Carlson leans forward, hands clasped. It's infuriating because the average American never sees this. They see a politician who talks about union jobs, healthcare, and kitchen table issues. They don't see the globe-trotting entourage that sets up million-dollar contracts overseas. Musk exhales. And that's by design. If people understood how deeply compromised their leaders were, they'd revolt. They'd demand an overhaul. But as it stands, we get small leaks. An email here, a photo there, and the rest remains buried under a mountain of legal jargon and corporate secrecy. Carlson tilts his head. You've mentioned philanthropic organizations as another avenue. Care to explain how that factors into Biden's network? Musk steeples his fingers. Sure, philanthropy is the perfect cover. A foundation claims to tackle big problems. Climate change, global hunger, you name it. Foreign governments or corporations make massive donations, all in the name of charity. The foundation has staff and overhead. Some of that money goes to real causes, sure, but a large portion can be funneled into networking events, travel, salaries for insiders, and crucially, donors gain direct access to Biden or his allies. Access that can shape policy, contracts, or regulatory decisions. Carlson's frustration grows palpable. And the media frames it as Biden's philanthropic work or humanitarian efforts, never digging into the donor list or the exact breakdown of funds. Musk's voice carries a note of bitterness. Exactly. Whenever a journalist tries to investigate, they're stonewalled or labeled as partisan hacks. Meanwhile, the narrative remains that Biden is a compassionate leader, not a wheeler-dealer forging alliances for profit. Carlson sets his jaw. All of this suggests an empire that's far larger than anything we see on the surface. If that's true, then how can the system be so silent? Are we really that naive? Musk shakes his head. It's not about naivety. It's about distraction and information overload. People are busy living their lives, working, raising families. They catch the news in snippets. They see a scandal, a denial, and they move on. Investigative journalism is almost extinct in mainstream outlets because it's expensive and ruffles the wrong feathers. Carlson sighs. I get it. But it still feels like we're shouting into a void. Unless there's a major leak or a whistleblower of extraordinary credibility, the story remains speculation. Musk's gaze hardens. True. Which is why the few who do speak out risk everything. Reputation, security, livelihood. If you connect the dots, you become a target. But maybe we're at a tipping point. People are tired of polished speeches and empty promises. They sense the duplicity. Carlson's lips tighten, acknowledging the danger. Let's talk about the personal cost. We've seen how whistleblowers are treated. Discredited, harassed, politicians' close ranks, the media smears them. How can we encourage more to step forward? Musk's voice is steady. By showing we'll stand behind them, that the public cares. Right now, whistleblowers often feel alone, hung out to dry. But if the conversation shifts, if we collectively say, we want the truth, no matter the cost, then we might see more people come forward with evidence, documents, recordings, enough to piece together the bigger picture. Carlson glances down at his notes, then back at Musk. I want to pivot slightly. You mentioned earlier that the Biden brand extends into industries that matter: tech, finance, energy. Can you give a concrete example of how that interplay might look? Musk nods. Take green energy, for instance. It's a politically charged sector. Biden champions it publicly. Meanwhile, certain green companies secure giant subsidies or favorable regulations. Those companies then donate to Biden-linked organizations or hire his ex-staffers as consultants. It's a cycle. Public endorsement leads to private profit, leads back to political gain. Carlson's eyes flash. And we see headlines celebrating the administration's commitment to combating climate change, never realizing that behind the curtain, fortunes are being made, deals are being cut, and the environment might just be a convenient talking point. Musk shrugs. It's a harsh reality, and it's not unique to green energy. Any industry can become a cash cow if you have the right political connections. Carlson frowns. Yet if you call it out, you're accused of denying progress or undermining important causes. It's a neat trick. Tie the corruption to something people genuinely support, and it becomes taboo to criticize. Musk's lips form a tight line. It's a strategy as old as politics. Wrap a self-serving move in a moral crusade, and anyone who questions it can be painted as a villain. Carlson takes a moment, scanning the studio. The reality of the conversation is heavy, like they're stepping onto dangerous ground. All right, let's address the elephant in the room. Biden is the sitting president. Is there any scenario where he's forced to face these accusations publicly and directly? Musk's eyes darken. Historically, it's tough to hold a president accountable while in office. Impeachment is political theater unless there's overwhelming evidence and public outcry. Plus, the establishment tends to protect its own. Most revelations, if they ever see the light, happen years later, once the damage is done. Carlson nods grimly. So we might be talking about revelations that come to light long after certain deals are irreversible, after certain policies have reshaped industries and alliances. Musk presses his lips together. Yes. By then, the beneficiaries will have cashed out, leaving the public to deal with the consequences: higher prices, fewer job opportunities, compromised sovereignty. And the politicians who orchestrated it will be off writing memoirs, secure in their fortunes. Carlson exhales. It's enough to make anyone cynical. Musk meets his gaze. Cynicism is easy. What's hard is deciding to care anyway, deciding that even if the odds are stacked, we won't let these stories die. Because if we do, we're essentially giving them free rein to keep building empires on our backs. Carlson's next words tremble with emotion. I refuse to accept that, so let's keep peeling back the layers. Many watchers say Biden's close ties to big banks have resulted in lenient regulations, that while everyday Americans struggle with loans and credit, the banks that support his network flourish. Musk nods. Look at campaign donations from major financial institutions. Look at who's been appointed to certain positions in the Treasury or Federal Reserve. It's all connected. Every time a big bank gets a bailout or a friendly regulation pass, we need to question whether it's just policy or a reward for loyalty. Carlson's scowl deepens. And this is just one piece of the puzzle. Combine it with all the other industries you mentioned, and it's staggering. Musk laughs bitterly. Staggering is the word. And we're only scratching the surface. Imagine how many deals never make headlines, how many handshake agreements happen in private jets or secluded golf courses. It's an entire shadow governance. Carlson leans forward, voice low. You speak like a man who's seen it up close. Musk holds Carlson's gaze. I have. When you operate large companies, you get glimpses into how politics actually works. Sometimes it's a phone call from a senator's office, hinting that if you donate to a certain cause, your projects will get fast-tracked. Multiply that by 1,000 across decades, and you have an entire infrastructure of quid pro quo. Carlson shakes his head, leaning back in exasperation. It's enough to make you question the very foundation of democracy. Musk's expression is solemn. It should, because democracy without accountability slides into oligarchy. The power rests in the hands of a few who enrich themselves at the expense of the many. He turns to the camera, a quiet urgency in his eyes. That's why this conversation matters. Because if we don't realize what's happening, we can't stop it. Carlson rubs the bridge of his nose. All right, let's take a step back. We've established the scale of Biden's influence, the network of donors and foreign governments, the philanthropic fronts, the cozy relationships with the press, and the industries that profit. Is there a smoking gun? Something so undeniable that it forces the public to confront this reality? Musk's brow furrows. A single piece of evidence might not exist. It's more like 1,000 pieces that form a mosaic. The challenge is getting people to see the full image. The only smoking gun would be a massive leak, authenticated beyond doubt, connecting all the dots, offshore accounts, private correspondences that outline the deals. But even then, the spin machine would go into overdrive, calling it disinformation or foreign meddling. Carlson's gaze drifts, a heavy silence thick in the air. So the only real way forward is collective awareness and relentless pursuit of the truth. A single broadcast won't change the world, but it might spark the conversation that leads more people to dig deeper. Musk inclines his head. Exactly. That's how we chip away at the fortress, by forcing it into public discourse, by refusing to let the narrative remain controlled. And if enough voices join in, maybe we begin to see real accountability. Carlson pinches the bridge of his nose again, then looks up with renewed resolve. I'm tired of superficial politics. I'm tired of feeling like everything is decided by backroom deals. Let's end this segment with a challenge to our viewers. Ask yourselves who truly benefits from Biden's policies. Follow the money, look past the speeches, and see which corporations, which foundations, and which foreign players come out on top. Musk offers a final thought, his voice tinged with hope and warning. And remember, this machine didn't build itself overnight. It won't crumble overnight either. But the first step is seeing it for what it is. After that, it's up to us, collectively, to decide whether we'll accept it or fight for something better. Carlson nods, slowly turning to face the camera for his closing statement. He takes a moment, letting the tension settle in the studio. When he speaks, his tone is measured but resolute. A long pause drapes over the studio, the lights hot and unrelenting. Carlson's voice is low and steady, carrying the weight of a truth most would rather ignore. He presses his palms together, collecting his thoughts, then addresses the audience directly. Some stories are easier left untold, especially when they challenge the comfortable illusions we've been fed for years. But easy doesn't mean right. What Elon Musk and I discussed isn't just rumor. It isn't the fever dream of conspiracy theorists. It's a snapshot of how power operates at the highest levels, a snapshot Joe Biden embodies but did not create alone. This empire, built on silent partnerships and hidden transactions, has thrived in the quiet corners where cameras rarely go. And if we pretend it's not there, if we focus instead on surface-level politics, we'll never see the strings being pulled behind the scenes. So here's what I'm asking. Pay attention. Look at who profits, who benefits from Biden's decisions. Watch the way certain media outlets handle or ignore uncomfortable facts. Ask why a lifetime politician has the wealth and connections more commonly associated with multinational CEOs. Question the philanthropic foundations that appear during political seasons, claiming to champion noble causes while funneling money from special interests. Demand transparency from the press, from politicians, from every institution that claims to serve you. And when you see them dodge, deflect, or distort, remember this conversation. It's tempting to dismiss all of this as cynicism, but cynicism is a trap. It's the complacent acceptance that nothing can change. I challenge you not to give in. Don't let the scale of corruption make you feel powerless. Instead, let it fuel your determination to speak up, to vote with discernment, to hold leaders accountable. If enough of us ask the tough questions, if enough of us refuse to be silenced or distracted, then maybe, just maybe, this machine can be slowed, if not dismantled. Elon Musk isn't a journalist. He's a man who's seen how deals get made at the top. I'm no saint either. I'm just someone who believes that the American people deserve more than orchestrated illusions. If that makes us targets, so be it. Because the alternative, living in a system where public trust is nothing more than a currency traded among elites, frightens me more than any retribution we might face. So ask yourselves, will you accept the polished speeches at face value? Or will you question the money trails, the shell corporations, and the philanthropic fronts that paint themselves as heroic while doing the bidding of a political dynasty? Don't let them wave flags and recite platitudes to conceal the quiet deals that shape our economy, our foreign policy, and our collective future. It's time to pull back the curtain on Biden's secrets, to demand that the promises of democracy align with reality. Because democracy should mean government by the people, not government by those who've learned to bend the rules and escape all scrutiny. If we fail to hold our leaders accountable, we surrender the very principles we claim to cherish. Thank you for watching, and for daring to look beyond the surface. This story isn't over. In fact, it might be just beginning. He stopped speaking, letting the words linger in the charged air. No glib sign-off, no dramatic gesture, just a resolute gaze, holding the audience's attention for one final moment before the screen cuts to black.